Imagine entering a crash site where there is no airplane. When relief forces reached the Cayucos Hills, they faced a scene that upset all their equations. No news of wings, fuselage, or engines. As if the Earth opened its mouth and swallowed a 100-ton jet. The impact was so strange that out of 43 passengers, the biggest thing remaining was just a shoe. Everything was pulverized because this was not a normal crash. The plane hit the mountain heart like a missile at supersonic speed. An impact that turned human and iron to dust in a fraction of a second. But amidst this ash and destruction, an intact piece was found that changed the story entirely. A piece that shouldn't have been there, a .44 Magnum gun. At 4:16 p.m., the case of Flight 1771 turned from an air accident into a terrible mystery. On the afternoon of December 7, 1987, Los Angeles International Airport was busy as always. Passengers of PSA Flight 1771 passed security gates one by one and boarded the plane. In those years, security measures for flight crew were different. The aircraft for this flight was a 4-engine British Aerospace 146 jet. This plane, known in the aviation industry as the Whisper Jet due to its quiet engines and high safety, was considered one of the most popular aircraft for short California routes. Captain Greg Lindemood, 43 years old, and First Officer James Nunn, 48 years old, were in charge of the flight. 43 people were present in the passenger cabin. The bitter point of the story was that a large portion of the passengers were not ordinary people, but employees of PSA itself, including managers and off-duty pilots who had chosen this flight to return home. The atmosphere inside the cabin was completely friendly and calm. At 3:31 p.m., the plane separated from the Los Angeles Airport runway and headed north towards San Francisco. The plane climbed gently and reached a cruising altitude of 22,000 feet. All flight parameters were normal. The pilots were engaged in a normal conversation with air traffic control regarding turbulence status. But at 4:13 p.m., the Cockpit Voice Recorder recorded a sound that had no technical justification. A sudden and muffled thud was heard from inside the passenger cabin. They asked each other what was that sound. They did not know that this was not the sound of a technical failure, but the sound of 2 gunshots occurring right behind their cabin door. The pilots had not yet had the opportunity to analyze the source of the sound when the situation changed completely. Ground radar suddenly noticed that transponder code 7700 indicating an emergency was not sent, but the plane had started to dive in an unusual manner. Flight 1771 went out of control. Investigation teams reached the crash site in the Cayucos Hills, but they faced a scene unlike any other crash. The plane had hit the ground with such intensity that it was practically pulverized. No body was complete and plane parts were like crumpled paper. But when the search team finally managed to find the black boxes amidst the debris, everything changed. They first went to the Cockpit Voice Recorder. They expected to hear system warnings, but what was recorded was the sound of a nightmare. Investigators were frozen. The pilots in the final moments did not know what was happening at all. Immediately, the data from the second black box was analyzed. Data from the last 6 seconds of the flight showed that there was no defect in the system. The control column was pushed forward with intensity. Someone had intentionally thrown the plane into a deadly dive. But who was the killer? And how had he brought a gun into the plane? The answer to this question was found amidst the ashes. The search team found something among thousands of small and large pieces whose survival was a miracle, a .44 Magnum revolver. Part of the trigger was broken off, but on a piece of skin stuck to the gun metal, an identifiable fingerprint existed. Now the police knew the killer was on this flight. They reviewed the passenger list to see who could have boarded the plane with a heavy gun without a security check. The list was quickly limited. The only ones exempt from screening were the airline employees themselves. On that flight, 4 employees were present. But when the fingerprint on the gun was compared with the personnel records of these 4 people, the computer locked onto one name. He was not a pilot. He was an angry former employee. His name was David Burke. But knowing the killer's name was not enough. Detectives had to understand why a former employee would commit such a horrific crime. The answer to this question was found amidst the wreckage, a document that gave everyone goosebumps. Amidst the plane wreckage, a sick bag was found with a message in David Burke's handwriting on it. A message addressed to his manager, Ray Thompson, saying, "Hi, Ray. I think it's sort of ironic that we end up like this. I asked for some leniency for my family and you wouldn't give it. Well, since I'm not gonna get any, I'm not gonna give any." This letter clarified everything. Ray Thompson was David Burke's direct manager who was present on the same flight. The root of this deadly hatred went back a few months, when Burke was caught stealing only $69 from the flight cocktail receipts and was immediately fired. He tried many times to get his job back, begged, and said he had 7 children, but Ray Thompson refused and said the law is the same for everyone. This humiliation and firing over an insignificant amount had driven Burke to the brink of madness. Now all the pieces of the puzzle were put together, and the police could reconstruct the final minutes of Flight 1771 exactly. David Burke rises from his seat, but does not draw the gun immediately. He first throws the sick bag containing his deadly message onto Ray Thompson's lap, and without saying a word, goes to the plane lavatory. This was likely the time he was preparing the gun and taking deep breaths. A few moments later, Burke comes out of the lavatory. He is no longer a passenger, he is a hunter. He goes straight to Thompson and fires 2 shots at him. These were the same muffled sounds the pilots heard. Immediately, the flight attendant, Deborah Neal, who witnessed the event, runs terrified toward the cockpit to warn them. She enters and shouts, "We have a problem," but Burke is behind her. With the cold sentence, "I am the problem," he fires a bullet at the flight attendant and takes her down. Now it is the pilot's turn. Burke fires 2 more bullets without pause. Now no one is in charge of flying the plane. Burke leans over the central console and pushes the plane yoke forward with all his power. The plane enters a deadly dive, but 1 bullet still remains in the gun. The recorded sound shows that in the moments of the fall, someone tried to enter the cabin. Analysts believe it was Douglas Arthur, the chief pilot of the company, who was present as a passenger, trying to retake the plane to save the passengers' lives. But Burke shoots the last bullet at him too. Burke could have committed suicide with that last bullet, but he did not do this. His fingerprint that was still locked on the trigger. If he had committed suicide, the gun would have fallen from his hand, but he held the gun tight in his hand until the moment of impact and the pulverization of the plane. He wanted to watch the fall and destruction of everything until the very last second. The tragedy of Flight 1771 changed the world of aviation forever. Before that day, flight crew and airline employees could enter the plane by showing an ID card without any physical search. But David Burke showed how deadly this security hole could be. Immediately after this incident, a new law called universal screening was passed. According to this law, all airline employees, from pilots and flight attendants to ground crew, must be searched exactly like ordinary passengers. Also, the system for terminated employee ID cards is revoked instantly and electronically, so no one can pass the gate with an invalid card anymore. Of course, it took years for security to become complete. It was after the events of September 11 that bulletproof doors for the cockpit became mandatory, and the presence of secret air marshals on flights was taken more seriously. But the start of this security awakening was from those very Cayucos hills. David Burke wanted to take revenge for $69 and his broken pride, but the price he took was the lives of 43 innocent humans. A case that proved sometimes the most dangerous thing on a flight is not a broken engine or stormy weather, but a human being who has nothing to lose.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until the next video, have a great day.